Hello and welcome to Lesson 3. We're in Unit 1, Lesson 3. We're going to talk about mercantilism today, and also you'll do an activity about triangular trade. So today we're going to analyze the economic system of mercantilism. When we're talking about economics, we're talking about money. And so this was a system of trade between essentially mother countries and their colonies. And so we're going to look at the impact on European colonies here. We could be speaking about the Spanish, the English, the French. Mercantilism was the economic system of the time, and so it applies to all of those mother countries. In particular, we're going to focus on the American colonies because we're in U.S. history, and so we'll be speaking about England or Britain's role with their colonies in the New World. So today you're going to define mercantilism. You're going to be able to explain who benefited most from this system and why is that important and how did they benefit in the system itself. And then at the end, you'll be able to summarize using this image provided at the bottom of the page and be able to describe the relationship, specifically the trade relationship between European nations and their colonies. Let's go ahead and get started. So how do we define mercantilism? You can see from the diagram to the right side of our screen here, this is European trade with their colonies, and this is how it worked for most nations. When we say mother country, we're referring to France, Spain, England, Portugal, one of those European nations that explored and created colonies in the New World. The colonies then are based in the New World or in the Western Hemisphere. When we think of those, we could think of Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. We could think of Portuguese colonies in what is modern-day Brazil, French colonies in Canada, or English colonies on the Atlantic coastline. Mercantilism is essentially a system that controls the economies of not just the mother country, but the colonies. So under this economic system, Parliament, the governing body, so similar to our Congress, passes laws that controls trade of the colonies in order to benefit the mother country. The aim was to get more gold and silver. Under mercantilism, colonists were expected to sell their raw materials, such as tobacco, rice, fur, and fish, at low prices to Britain. So Britain passes new laws, and under these new laws, only colonial or English ships could carry goods to and from the colonies. This helped the colonies in some ways. For example, the law encouraged colonists to build their own ships. As a result, New England became a prosperous shipbuilding center. Also, because of these acts, colonial merchants did not have to compete with foreign merchants because they were sure of having a market for their goods in England. What happens is essentially the colonies become a place for raw materials to be produced, gold, silver, fur, lumber, tobacco, eventually wheat and other goods like that. The mother country then serves as almost the factory. So those ships send their raw materials to Europe, and then they're produced by the people that live in those countries. For example, tobacco will be grown in Virginia, and sent to England, where it's processed and turned into smoking tobacco in the factories of England. And then that tobacco is then sent back to the colonies and stays in the markets of those European countries. So you have two markets, the colonies and in the mother country. The colonies are providing those raw materials. The mother country is manufacturing or producing goods that can be sold at stores for that. And then you have two markets, both in Europe and in the colonies, to buy those goods. This makes the mother country extremely wealthy. In exchange, the colonists are supposed to buy British manufactured goods, like we discussed, such as glass, paper, and tea, which were more expensive. Mercantilists believe that this unequal trade benefiting the mother country at the expense of the colonies would increase the wealth of the mother country, and it did. So our basic definition here of what is mercantilism. This is the economic system where a mother country controls the raw materials of its colonies, and the colonies are a market for the mother country. So that what we mean by a market, just like if you go to the grocery market or the grocery store, is that those colonies then become a place where those manufactured goods can be sold. This makes the mother country more money. A key aspect of mercantilism is that colonies can only trade with the mother country. So, for example, Spanish colonies in South America could not trade with the English colonies on the Atlantic coastline. French colonies along the Mississippi River were not supposed to trade with English or Spanish colonies in the New World. This was so the mother country could control their colony and the trade of their colony. So they didn't become too independent or start making money on their own, and the mother country not be able to get that wealth for themselves. All right, so let's review real quick. And we've talked about especially the Columbian exchange, but here we want to touch on triangular trade. Today, you're going to have an activity on the next page of your notebook where you're going to read. Remember that you can press the audio button and it'll read it to you, but you'll read and then you'll complete the diagram on triangular trade. So how does mercantilism apply to this system? It's called triangular trade because we can see here the triangle is created through the trade lines, those red, green, and yellow lines. And you can read the legend or the key here and see where the English 13 colonies were on the Atlantic coastline. We can see that here. We can see the trade routes and what was being brought on those ships or taken on those ships. So for example, let's walk through a process together. An explorer would leave English ports. They would travel to the coastline of Africa with iron products, alcohol, weapons, cloth. There is a large market there in the kingdoms of Africa for those goods. They would then trade those goods and they would leave African ports with enslaved Africans on their ships. And so that's this gold line here. They would also leave with gold because along this West African coastline, we have three trading spots, the Ivory Coast, the Gold Coast, and then what's referred to as the Slave Coast. Those were the largest exports out of the West African kingdoms. And so that's what's being taken on this line towards the New World. When those ships reached either South America, the Caribbean, or North America, those enslaved people would be sold at market, and raw materials are then picked up from the colonies and taken back to Europe or to England. So we see here some of the materials that are leaving the English colonies are fish, whale oil, lumber. There are tons of trees in the New World, and Europe has used all of its trees building its cities. And so lumber is going to be a massive market to bring on ships over to Europe. Tobacco is also going to become a major staple crop in the South, around Virginia and the southern colonies. And we can even see that this triangle goes backwards in some sense. So we see trade from Europe towards the colonies bring teas, spices, furniture, cloth, tools. There's a system of travel and trade here that resembles a triangular. So we call it triangular trade. This is also referred to as the transatlantic trade. Transatlantic, crossing the Atlantic, trans is our prefix for across. So we're going across the Atlantic, transatlantic trade. One of the defining characteristics of triangular trade would be this passage, this yellow route here, which we'll talk about later. We refer to this as the Middle Passage. As the demand for African labor grew rapidly, not only in the Spanish colonies, but also in other parts of the Americas, we're going to see enslaved Africans becoming highly valuable on sugar plantations in the Caribbean islands and in the Portuguese colony of Brazil. This will expand very quickly to the American colonies when we see the southern colonies of Virginia and the Carolinas and Georgia begin to expand their agricultural operations. In this Middle Passage, this yellow route between Africa and the New World, some scholars today estimate that more than 10 million enslaved Africans are transported to the Americas between the 1500s and the 1800s. The vast majority come from Western Africa. Most of the Africans were sent to Brazil or the Caribbean. However, a total of more than 500,000 enslaved Africans would eventually arrive in the British colonies of North America. They're going to be a big part of the story that we look at over the course of this school year. So why would the colonies not like mercantilism? Why would they be at a disadvantage? This is a critical thinking question. We talked about how they benefited. So they would have to build their own ships to transport goods, to trade with England, but then that would also produce strong lumber and shipbuilding industries in the New World. Also, how could this economic system benefit the mother country? So it's designed to benefit the mother country. How in particular are they benefiting, maybe even twice? All right, the last thing that you're going to do at the end of your interactive notebook is you're going to analyze this political cartoon. This political cartoon covers the economic theory of mercantilism. But before you do that, we need you to go through and do your short mini lesson. It should be a review over primary and secondary documents and bias. And so that's what you'll come across in your notebook before you get to this political cartoon. And I will show you in just a moment. Here we are at our slides. We can see this is the diagram that you'll do at the end of this video. This is the diagram that you'll do at the end of this video, and you can press the audio button to have the text read to you. You will complete the 3 parts of the diagram. Feel free to come back to this video and review triangular trade to help you do that if needed. The next things that you're going to do is a quick review video lesson and a review on primary and secondary sources, and you'll drag our stickers here and sort them into these 2 categories. And then we have a quick lesson on bias and how to detect bias in a source. And again, your audio buttons here, it should read the whole page to you. Get a good working understanding of what bias is. And the very last thing you'll do in your notebook will be our political cartoon on mercantilism. So you'll combine the knowledge that you've learned in our lesson and the skills of analyzing primary, secondary sources and identifying bias, and you'll apply it to this political cartoon. All right, reach out and ask for help if you need it. I hope this has been good to help you understand the economic theory of mercantilism, and email if you have any questions.